titled The Dialogue. In this, we'll be picking topics that matter to us and the world. This initiative has been jointly undertaken by Mr. Siraj Hussain, Mr. Iqbal, and myself as a convener of the committee. The topic of today's lecture is highly critical, engaging. It will be delivered by our esteemed guest and speaker, Mr. Talmiz Ahmad. On behalf of India Islamic Cultural Center and on behalf of our president, Mr. Salman Khurshid, who is currently out of country, and the entire India Islamic Cultural Center board, I would like to warmly welcome our chief guest, Mr. Talmiz Ahmad, along with all the distinguished guests in the attendance. To begin the program, I hand over the podium to Mr. Iqbal. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to all of you. So before I formally start, I will request the technical person to run a short video by Mr. Salman Khurshid, since he was not here today. So he has specially recorded this message for all of you. Could we? प्ले कर दूं या
नहीं, एक सेकंड आप कर दें, मैं कर दूं।
इससे पहले देख लो एक बार, फिर वहाँ से सिर्फ 1 मिनट की जरूरत है। जी लाइट्स की बंद करने की ज़रूरत है। प्रोजेक्टर पे लेगा उसको हटा दो। ठीक है, जाओ वहाँ से वॉइस प्ले कर दो।
My good wishes to all members of India Islamic Cultural Center and all those people who are deeply interested in this new exercise that we've begun, which is the IICC dialogues on topics that matter to the world. India and the world is our focus. We are beginning this exercise with the first lecture by none other than Mr. Talmiz Ahmad. He's been Ambassador of India in Saudi Arabia and has been a very distinguished diplomat. He will be speaking on West Asia, the way ahead. And this is a critical topic on which I do believe a lot of you are interested. I would have been most delighted to be present for the first IICC dialogue lecture. However, because of an event of the Aligarh Old Students in Kuwait, I have to be away for this day. I will dearly miss all of you, as indeed the very important person who is going to give us this lecture. But I will watch from wherever I am, and I do believe that we will all return from this lecture greatly informed and greatly benefited in our understanding of international relations. Good luck to you and all the best. Thank you very much.
So I think after listening to what Salman Saab said, I don't think I would be in a position to add anything to what he already said. But I'm greatly honored that Mani Shankar Iyer Sahab has also arrived. And may I request you, sir, straight away to take the chair here. Mani sir, please come here. So we had thought that there will be initially that there would be a protocol of somebody presiding over it or something like that. But since a former cabinet minister and a diplomat is here, and none other than Mani Shankar himself, so I would be extremely honored to have him here today. And just one thing that I would like to add this afternoon, that this place is known for good quality Mughlai food. That's good that we should all have good food. But we want to make it a place where we could have something food for thought as well. So this effort that IICC Dialogues, that was very much the brainchild of our elder brother Siraj Hussain Sahab. I am just associated myself with him. So this event is just one beginning to make this center an intellectual hub, a think tank, a research center. So this is just the beginning, not the end of that. And to make this happening, we would be needing your support, your cooperation. And by very your presence today, this afternoon, especially on a Saturday, we are extremely, extremely excited to all of you have here. And we are extremely, extremely encouraged by your presence, that whatever we think of making this particular center a place for food for thought, I'm sure that we would be able to do that. So without any formality, since we don't want to continue this bouquet culture and all, but I will request Dr. Shamama to just hand over a plant to our esteemed guest, and after that I will be straight away handing over to Mr. Talmiz Ahmad. And Dr. Shamama again for Dr. Mani Shankar Iyer. And with this, now I will take you leave, requesting Talmiz sir. Talmiz sir will be having a PPT presentation. After that, we will have a question answer sessions, and then all the floor will be yours. Sir.
आप ऑन कर दीजिए ना, एक मिनट यार, मेरी माउस नहीं है, तो माउस क्या रहता है?
Yes, we can remove these side things. Yeah. ये हटा दीजिए. और वो कंट्रोल ये यहाँ से. Okay. Respected Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer, Siraj Hussain Sahab, Shamama, ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely delighted to be amongst you on this occasion. Indeed, my first visit to the Islamic Center, and I have this opportunity to address all of you on matters that are of great significance to us. The pictures that I have put together for you encapsulate some of the concerns that some of the well springs of what is going on a divide between three major Abrahamic faiths in a small piece of territory at the coast of the Mediterranean. It's part of a very long part of global history, the source of civilization, where 3 or 4 people have interacted with each other over several millennia: the Arabs, the Persians, the Jews, and the Turks. The story of this land is a story of their interaction and the engagements that they have had from time to time with elements from Europe, from across the divide, and they have come forward and they have interacted with these people. Very often they have overwhelmed them militarily, and in return have themselves been overwhelmed from time to time. But while we focus on the military aspects, we know that there were long periods of peace and cultural exchanges. So this is a very complex narrative of very substantial engagement and cooperation that has shaped world history, and also occasional military divides, as we have seen going on recently. A quick overview, largely familiar with you all. Gaza is one of the tiniest places that you can imagine, and I have deliberately put a map before you, a map of extreme West Asia, and even there you can barely see Gaza. Who could have imagined that this place, that even in a large map needs a magnifying glass to be spotted, which is all of 41 kilometers long and about 13 kilometers broad at the highest, at the longest extent, has just experienced 43,000 people dead and 100,000 injured. 70% of those killed are women and children. There are several thousand people buried under the rubble that has been destroyed. It has been this land, which you can barely see, has been subjected to a blockade for over 2 decades and has been subjected to constant attacks from its Israeli neighbors. What happened on 7th October last year is unique only in one sense, and one sense alone. Though it is indicated to most people, particularly those who are ill-informed about West Asia, as if history of Gaza began on that day. But do recall that Gaza has been subjected to extraordinary violence from Israel over several decades earlier. And indeed, all of that violence had been initiated from the Israeli side. This is the first occasion when a military initiative, when a violent initiative came from Hamas. And this is what shocked the Israeli people. And they thought among themselves, this is what we do. How has it been done to us? How did these people, these wretched people, have the temerity to cross our walls and come and annihilate us? They rarely mention to you that about 300 to 400 soldiers were also killed in this attack. They focus on the women, that they were molested and they were ill-treated. And I fear some of them might have been. But this entire conflict is clothed in so much misinformation that it is almost impossible even now to tell that we cannot tell truth from fiction. It will all come out over a period of time. But today, as I speak to you, there are reports that the people are facing famine. The people who started as 2.3 million have lost, they have been displaced. Almost the entire population has been displaced several times. They have gone back and forth like shuttlecocks on the space, on this geographical space that they used to call home. almost all their homes have been physically destroyed. They are now facing famine conditions. And you will recall, and these are just little news bars, briefly mentioned, hospitals deliberately and directly assaulted, medical personnel deliberately killed, media persons deliberately killed. Then you have had attacks on ambulances, and all in the name that they are shields of Hamas. And now you know that actually the people who have been arrested in Gaza are being used as forces, as shields by the Israeli forces. What a travesty. What is the origin of this? None of us will understand the situation relating to what is happening today in the state of Israel and the occupied territories unless we know the origins of this statehood. The origin lies in a messianic conception, a conception that the Jews are a unique, distinct, and separate people, that they are a divinely chosen people, a fact that separates them from all of humankind, that this land has got certain unique qualities, and therefore it was promised to the Jewish people for their exclusive use by God. They live on this land with divine command. And this land, once the state of Israel was proclaimed, the land has now been liberated. And that there is no sanction, no divine sanction for this land to be shared. The religious Zionists informed their people that we have testimony from the Old Testament that we are allowed to have only 3 engagements with people who are not Jewish: extermination, exile, and enslavement. What you are witnessing is all 3 of these right at the same time. Massive extermination, deliberate pressures upon them through physical violence, and then food denial of humanitarian services. And of course, they have lived under enslavement for all these periods. But these are hardened people. The entire effort is to somehow get them to go. Somehow they should magically disappear so that this land once again retains its sacredness. But they refuse to go. In the occupied territories that we have, West Bank, 3.6 million people, Gaza, 2.3 million people, and over 500,000 people, Palestinians, in the East Jerusalem. All 3 occupied after the 67 war. There has been a movement which is now subdued as far as the public domain is concerned, but very significant. The idea of Greater Israel. This is a messianic concept again. Israel is a very rare country in the world that has existed from 1948 but has no constitution. Because a constitution requires the people who have finalized it to first define the territory. And in the case of Israel, there is no definition of territory. The second aspect of a constitution is that all those who are citizens are given equal rights. That is another reason why you do not have a constitution, because while there are 20% people who are non-Jewish, they are seriously and deliberately disabled. So you have this scenario of claims, sometimes muted, sometimes significant, claims on territories all around. That is why you do not define the state of Israel in terms of a constitution. There is no limit. And these limits, what they are proclaimed, and the claims that are made from time to time, some of which I have picked up from the internet, they are based on some place that a prophet of the Old Testament touched. And therefore it belongs to the state of Israel. There was Moses in Egypt, possibly Abraham in present-day Saudi Arabia. Of course, Abraham originated from Iraq. You have stories relating to the movement of the prophets of the Old Testament all across the Arabian Peninsula and all across West Asia. Each of those territories can be claimed as an integral part of Israel. There have been some attempts to address these issues. The most serious attempt was done after the Cold War. George Bush Sr. encouraged this dialogue. A dialogue took place over a period of time, a substantial dialogue in Oslo. In Oslo, they agreed on certain things. The most important and fundamental agreement was that the Palestine Liberation Organization recognized the state of Israel in terms of its 1967 borders, the borders before the war. And in return, the state of Israel recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. These are significant. The two people who had been in conflict recognized each other's legitimacy, recognized that there is a state of Israel that is here to stay, and simultaneously the state of Israel recognized that there is a Palestinian people who have certain claims and demands that need to be addressed in some stage or form. The arrangements that were made at Oslo were interim arrangements. That means this is for the first time we have talked to each other. Let's agree on certain basic issues. There was a Palestine Authority that was constructed and was given some municipal responsibilities and some petty security responsibilities. There are declared 3 final status issues. These are the issues which, once successfully addressed, will resolve all matters between Israel and the people of Palestine. These are, number 1, that there will be a Palestinian state on the occupied territories which will be sovereign and economically viable. Number 2, that the East Jerusalem, the area that was occupied after the 67 war, will be the capital of this territory. And number 3, the families of those refugees who were who had been forcibly evicted from their home in 1948 and 1967, they have a right of return. These issues were left for a later period. And that has not come since then, because as Yitzhak Rabin, Prime Minister, who had seen through the Oslo Accord, the last accord when he signed it, it was in September 1995, and a little over a month later he had been assassinated. The story of that period is a story of a very deeply divided people, a very aggressive, hard right wing, encouraged by hard right elements even within the United States, and one of them finally assassinated the Prime Minister. Since then, there has been no serious attempt. I say no serious attempt because an attempt was made to address these issues at what is called Camp David II. This was put together by Clinton, and it brought together at that time Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel facing an election, and also Yasser Arafat. This is regarded as a textbook case of how not to conduct a conference. There was nothing that prepared the people for success. Clinton was desperate. The Democrats had been defeated in the election. He had no credibility whatsoever. He was looking at his legacy and was desperate for an agreement on this so that he could be remembered not for his sexual peccadillos, but for this agreement. That is the reason why he was there. Ehud Barak was looking at a very difficult election and expected to be defeated, which he was finally. And you had, at that time, Arafat. Arafat was not alone. He was told by all these other Arab leaders that Jerusalem is not for you to sell out on. Jerusalem is not just a Palestinian issue, it is an Islamic issue. In the event, Barak offered quite a lot, more than any other Israeli leader had done till then. But the maximum that he offered was not even minimally acceptable. He could not offer a sovereign state. He offered a large number of tiny territories which were laughingly referred to as Bantustans, because this is what South Africa had done, that is what the apartheid regime had done in South Africa. Large number of little places which were pretended to be, they were homelands for the black people, which not a single country in the world recognized. They offered something like that. Do recall here that apartheid South Africa and Israel had a very close relationship, mutually supportive relationship. It is in that, inspired by the South African example, they offered this little territory. They were not contiguous. There were security forces all over the place. So that was, Jerusalem of course was not negotiable. The maximum they could offer is control over the holy shrine, but under Israeli supervision. And so of course there was no serious attempt to look at the idea of the refugees return. So that has remained. Since then, we've had constant military skirmishes. I won't burden you, they are all available. Let us go forward with this background to what is happening now. What the Israelis decided, that if we cannot address the issues that are crucial for the settlement, let us create realities on the ground. And what they did was, in the case of the West Bank, they gradually expanded the settlements of the Jewish community. And these have expanded very rapidly, and today there are at least 700,000 settlers in the West Bank. And in order to protect them, security forces have been enhanced and walls have been created, and more than half the West Bank is effectively under Israeli control. So 700,000 settlers, and you have 3.6 million Palestinians living in the most miserable and humiliating conditions. In East Jerusalem, again, you will see realities are being created. And of course, you have read about the judicial intervention so that people are being systematically deprived of homes that they have enjoyed for several generations. These are realities on the ground. In the case of Gaza, Israel found that it had very few settlers, and in fact, the number of settlers, about 7,000, needed about 15,000 security personnel to protect them. So Israel decided to withdraw in 2005 from Gaza, and there was an eviction of the people. But from that day till today, that place has been under blockade. It has been called variously the world's largest prison, world's largest open-air prison. It has also been called by a Jewish visitor the largest concentration camp in the world. So what happened now? There is a substantial background. As I have already stated, history did not begin on October 7. There is a very long narrative. The story of contemporary Israel centers around the persona of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is a towering personality. He has been a central figure in Israeli politics since he became Prime Minister in 1996. His biography is well known. A very sophisticated, a very urbane, very articulate person. He is said to be a political genius. The word used for him is magician. And he is constantly able to ensure, this magician is constantly able to ensure that regardless of the onerous conditions he finds himself, he is always able to turn the situation around to his personal advantage. Therefore, his critics call him self-absorbed, self-centered. His personal integrity leaves something to be desired, because he is now facing certain charges of corruption and abuse of office. Therefore, it is absolutely essential for him to be Prime Minister, Because if he were to cease to be prime minister at any time, the judicial processes would be restarted to his discomfiture. He is to be, one of his most significant achievements has been to ensure, whether he is in office or not, Israel has one of the most powerful lobby supporters in the United States. They have been able, it had happened earlier after the 67 war, Begin played a role in that, and they created what is referred to as the Israel lobby, a very powerful group of people, Americans, deep inside the political establishment, so that successive presidents and senators and congressmen have ensured that the United States unwaveringly is supportive of Israel's maximalist agenda. But their support base it has gone further. It has penetrated the American financial sector, the media sector, and also now the technology sector. So there are very important support groups. There is in recent years, possibly over the last 2, 3 or 4 decades, a group that has now become extraordinarily supportive of Israel. Israel no longer needs to depend on Jewish support anymore. The Jewish support, in fact, is divided. And many American Jews are not beholden to the tactics and to the absence of integrity of the Prime Minister of Israel. This group that has now emerged as supportive are the Christian evangelists. Christian evangelists are a Protestant group. They have an understanding of the Bible that is uniquely their own. They believe that there will be a second coming of Jesus Christ, which is foretold in the Bible, and which indeed is accepted even in Islam and in Christianity. This second coming will be expedited in a set of circumstances which recalls for the cleansing of the Holy Land of satanic elements, namely the Muslims, which is why the Christian evangelists celebrated 1967, the 67 war, and the integration of Jerusalem, East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. They believe, but the second coming in terms of these millennialists is extraordinary, because at the time of the second coming, the Jews will be given the choice of either becoming Christians or dying a horrible death. The Jews, as far as the Jews are concerned, they say, we don't believe any of this. But if it means that we get these people support for us, well and good, we don't care. So long as I have support from the Americans, I don't need to follow through on the logic of what they have to say about the second coming. But the Christian evangelists believe in the second coming. And they are a very powerful influence today, particularly on Donald Trump in his first term. I checked whether, because I didn't see many references to them, whether they are still supportive of him now. And I am told that they are. And he sings their song and he speaks their language. They were the ones who got Donald Trump, they influenced Donald Trump to shift the American embassy to Jerusalem. And they were the ones who are putting pressure on various territories which are occupied to become part of Jerusalem, become part of Israel. So they are a formidable lobby today. They have huge numbers. They are totally supportive of Donald Trump, which is why during his first term, he had a certain approach to the region. What has happened since then? What Netanyahu has been able to convince successive American administrations is this. Very simple, is this. The problem in West Asia is not Palestine. The problem in West Asia is Iran. Iran is a malign presence. It is a malicious presence. It is behind every terrorist act that takes place. It is viscerally anti-Jewish. It is a threat to the American interests. And therefore, what we need to do is to build up a powerful coalition consisting of the Americans, the Israelis, and selected Arab states, so that we become a coalition against Iran. And it has been convincing. It's been impressive. We don't need to do anything about the Palestinians. In 2020, the UAE normalized relations with Israel without asking for anything vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And that was supposed to be the pattern. Bahrain got on board, Morocco also, and Sudan. Look at the narrative surrounding this. The UAE has 6 or 7 million people, of whom 1 million are Emiratis. Strictly speaking, it has no strategic value. It is a formidable presence. If they are about 10% to 12% Emiratis in the country, there are nearly 50% who are Indians. This is the reality. Therefore, the UAE does not need to worry about domestic public opinion. Nor does Bahrain. Bahrain went along. Morocco has a very old Moroccan Jewish community, living, several thousand of them live in Israel. They have an emotional attachment to the land of their ancestors. Morocco also, without having any oil, needs to have tourism. And therefore, they have done a kind of normalization, but it is normalization without exchange of ambassadors. And then there was Sudan. In the throes of a democratic process, the Americans offered them two things. They said, we will remove you from the list of countries that support terrorism. So you can see the value and worth of that wretched list. If you can remove it to serve, you remove a country because it serves your political purpose. And they offered $1 billion in development assistance to the Sudanese. The Sudan, of course, has its own logic. They said that they were recognizing the Israelis and they would normalize ties, except that at home, the democratic process fell away. The generals took control, and after the generals took control, you've had a civil conflict from last year. Sudan has been removed from the list of countries that support terrorism, but the development assistance hasn't come forward. Somehow it is still missing. And of course, you have seen the state of Sudan. It is breaking apart and several thousand people are dead. This is the value of that normalization. In December 2022, his party did not do well in elections, but he put together a remarkable coalition. He could form the government and become prime minister because he had to ensure he doesn't go to the criminal court. He had to be prime minister. He brought in various religious and extremist parties. It is the most extreme coalition government in Israel's entire history. It has shifted to the right long ago, particularly after 67. But never has Israel legitimized these people. They are ultra-nationalist and ultra-religious. Some of them are beyond the loony fringe. They are hardcore racist, hardcore xenophobic, very often speak the language of extermination. One of them is the finance minister of the country. The other is the national security minister of the country. They enjoy huge benefits and and because they keep Netanyahu in power, they enjoy very substantial budgetary support. The massive expansion of settlements in the West Bank is largely due to this kind of arrangement. It is absolutely appalling. All of this happened well before the present conflict. Another thing happened. The entire focus of normalization was with regard to Saudi Arabia. All eyes on Saudi Arabia, that somehow we should get Saudi Arabia to normalize with Israel. We then don't need to do anything for the Palestinians. And there was a dialogue and it went quite far, and most of the reports we were getting from American sources, the Saudis wanted A, B, C, and then they also, with regard to Palestine, they asked for a statement from Netanyahu that he is committed to the two-state solution. They didn't ask for more. They did not even ask, it is said, for any concrete progress in this regard. But Netanyahu could not give even that statement because his right-wing associates told him that we will bring the government down if you hint at any progress with regard to Palestinian rights and their right to a state. all of this was going on. But this had got impetus because of something even equally dramatic which had happened earlier. And this was in March 2023. Suddenly we were shocked to see that Beijing had put together an engagement between the Iranians and the Saudis, and they had entered into an agreement to normalize relations between them. In fact, this American thrust towards Saudi-Israel normalization occurred in the background of this particular development. And at that time, that coalition that the Israelis and the Americans had fondly wanted, a coalition that would bring together the United States and Israel, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. They got the UAE, but they were still struggling to get Saudi Arabia and not making the progress that they would have liked. You must also remember that conscious and deliberate provocations took place during this period. There were, because of the right-wing influence, there was considerable expansion of settlements, but more importantly, the settlers there were deliberately radicalized and provided weaponry. And with this weaponry, they had started killing the Palestinians in that territory. And even before the 7th October skirmish war, you find that 600 to 700 Palestinians had already been killed in the West Bank. And then you found their ministers deliberately provoking Muslims and other worshippers by strolling through the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was viewed as a desecration. And even the UAE was appalled by this, and they demanded that there should be a certain moderation in Israeli conduct. So there is a very immediate background to what happened on 7th October. What have we seen since then? I'll give you the big picture quickly. The war is not just confined to Gaza. It was expanded to the West Bank as well as to Lebanon. Wanton killings have become an end in themselves. Ask yourself, what is the strategy? We were told initially that annihilation of Hamas is the strategy. And even Biden, as pathetic as he was, told Netanyahu, he called him affectionately Bibi, look Bibi, you don't have a strategy. You have not thought about anything. What has happened, and I am saying this to you with all conviction, wanton mass murder is the policy. It is an end in itself. It is not meant to lead to anything. They said we are killing Hamas. All through this period, they said Hamas is at the edge. We are going to kill all of them. They are only 30 or 40,000. And we've already killed 30,000, so maybe there are just another 10,000. Give us a few weeks. And pathetic Biden agreed with that and went along with that. That is why, in fact, if you reflect on it, at least part of the reason for the election result that you had a few days ago is just entirely can be attributed to the role of the president through this entire imbroglio, where people saw with their own eyes so many thousand people being killed with nothing to show for it. You say 40,000, Hamas is 40,000, you've already killed 43,000, but 70% are women and children. How many of them were Hamas? So this was the kind of nonsense that was put together. But the United States started arming Israel from day one. So 7th October, the war started. The weapons airlift began from 8th October and has not stopped for a day. Numerous airlifting has been taking place of weaponry. And if all the mass murder that has taken place in the region, it is directly attributable to the weapon supplies from the United States. Not once did the American presidency suggest to Israel that our support for you in terms of arms supplies is conditional on your agreeing to a ceasefire and massive movement of humanitarian assistance. In the American mind, these two were separate issues. The president pathetically pleaded for a ceasefire and increased humanitarian assistance. He even constructed a silly old jetty, which the winds of the Mediterranean swept away. Exactly, it's a metaphor as far as the American policy is concerned. It is in this background that you see the population has been displaced several times over. They are treated with deep contempt. Sometimes the Israelis tell them, you move here and that is the area where if you are found there, you are dead. But they sometimes attack the same area which they have declared as a safe haven. There is a narrative of the so-called solution. The US president publicly spoke of a two-state solution. He publicly presented certain ceasefire proposals. But the Israelis, in Bob Woodward's book, War, he says that it is Hamas that never wanted a ceasefire solution. That is completely a canard. What Hamas said, we will release all the hostages, but we need Israel to withdraw militarily from Gaza. That is not acceptable to the Israeli side. And that is why you never had a ceasefire solution up to now. Therefore, to blame one side that the Hamas wanted to continue the firefight, that is completely wrong. You have had certain unique features of what has been happening here. The International Court of Justice pronounced on two occasions. On one occasion, they suggested that what has been happening at the hands of the Israelis could be genocide, an absolutely appalling and particularly sensitive remark to a people and a leadership which has themselves experienced genocide, referred to as the Holocaust. And then they said the second judgment which came from the ICJ was that Israel should immediately withdraw from all occupied territories without any conditions whatsoever. The United States also got fed up with the Israelis at some point. You had Biden and then Kamala Harris in March making statements about the Israelis. You had a senator who personally criticized Netanyahu. And towards the end of March, the United States even allowed a UN Security Council resolution to go through. But Netanyahu is not called Mr. Magician for nothing. As he saw the pressure building up from the Americans, he attacked the Iranian embassy in Damascus and killed 4 generals. Immediately, the threat of conflict with Iran emerged, and the United States president stopped talking about ceasefire, stopped talking about humanitarian assistance, and he immediately stated that the United States stands side by side with the state of Israel. You wretched man, these are the people who actually went and attacked. They are the ones who initiated the conflict. They are the ones who have provoked Iran. And you say we stand side by side. Not one statement of remonstrance that you should not be provoking this. But when we see Woodward's book, behind the scenes, the Americans mutter among each other. I don't think Netanyahu thinks through the consequences of what he does. His effort was to embroil the Americans in the conflict. And steadily, that is what he has done. He did the Israeli attack. There was that was the attack on the embassy. 4 generals dead. Waited to see the Iranian response. The Iranians responded in a certain way. They responded back. It was a controlled exchange. Basically, I called it at that time a technology demonstration. But that was again not enough, because in May, the United States again started talking about a ceasefire at that time. So, I have used this term and I stand by it. What you are looking at now, the scenario where there was considerable domestic pressure on Netanyahu, and the people were rising up and coming out onto the streets in their hundreds of thousands. They had seen through him. They had identified the fact that here is a prime minister who actually doesn't care for the hostages. He cares only for himself. And the assessment that was made in the media, not just in the American media, but in various other media, and I also wrote about this, that this man cannot afford a ceasefire. Because the moment there is a ceasefire, there will be questions asked within Israel. How did you allow us to be attacked? You are Mr. Security. You are supposed to protect the Jewish people. You allowed this. What was the failure? A political failure, a military failure, an intelligence failure. But now we see you doing nothing to bring these hostages back. He can't afford that. And they would reopen that criminal case where the judiciary has been waiting for his appearance. One more provocation was the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, killed in Tehran. Once again, the Iranians were being tweeted, saying that, come now, we will see. And there was a hope, and there was also writing about this, that the Iranians will attack, and in the counter-attack, the Americans will be brought in, and we will annihilate that country and its nuclear power and oil facilities and bring it now, take it back to the old Stone Age, as we did in the case of Iraq and Libya. The scenario has changed from September. The first achievement from the Israeli side was the explosions of the pagers and the explosions of the walkie-talkies. Several thousand were injured, several hundred were killed, several thousand were injured. After that, the Iranians attacked, there was the assassination of Nasrallah, and then the Iranians attacked with the 200 missiles on 1st October. 16th October, Sinwar was killed. In Israel, there has been a celebration. Targeted killings have that impact. A beleaguered people, a people demoralized, a people who are insecure, several thousand of them have been relocated out beyond the space of the Lebanon border because of the Hezbollah attacks. There is a joy when you see a targeted killing of people who have been demonized. Haniyeh, Sinwar, Nasrallah, these are all names that the Israelis despise. They are associated with evil, demonic, satanic elements. And this brave leader of ours has actually killed all of them. It shows Israel is a tough country. It is superior as far as technology is concerned. We can reach anywhere that you want. And that is what Netanyahu said at the UN General Assembly, that we can reach you wherever you are. The man had been changed. He had become the true Goliath that he is. And he had taken on all these militia. And Israeli army is today once again redeemed. And I have asked myself from day one, when was the last time the Israeli army faced another army? 50 years ago. What you face today are militants, militia. And civilians is the price that you have extracted from these militants. And even the pathetic Biden told Netanyahu that you can't annihilate Hamas, he says in Bob Woodward's book. Hamas is an idea. That idea will persist. And all of us know who have faced the brunt of militant activity that there is no way you can kill a movement because it is an idea. And they keep on taking casualties, and they take casualties, and you keep on killing more and more and more of them. It is good for publicity. It is good for short-term media activity, but it does not solve your problem. All of us know this, and I think Netanyahu knows this better than all of us, that killing of high-profile leaders does not solve your problem. The kind of disgruntlement that you have, the disenchantment, the unhappiness, the distance, all of those are in place as they were from the very beginning. And you have seen this from that day till today. Hezbollah continues to shower its missiles and its drones upon Israel. And they have not been able to relocate those 60,000 displaced people, which is considered to be a war aim. But have you noticed another thing over the last 3 weeks? Sustained killings in Gaza and in Lebanon. Every day you get a news bar or a report, 40 people were killed, 60 people were killed, so many women were killed, so many children were killed, Lebanon so-and-so district was attacked. in the last 3 weeks, you can see once again, there is no Hezbollah to attack, there is no Hamas to attack. For the short term, they are decapitated. But the bloodlust has not been assuaged. And that is why you see today that you have these constant attacks which are going on. And as I point out to you here, the United States remains a mute spectator. What do I read in all of this that has happened so far? Netanyahu, of course, I think his own people have made it clear. Every other day you have people demonstrating against him. They know. Even the right-wing media has started criticizing him. Totally self-absorbed, and his priority is personal political survival. Second, what many people, unless they were the serious scholars of Israel and read literature that is not readily available in English, the country has zealots who are the mirror images of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. They are extremely racist, xenophobic, and extremely violent. And today they are at the center of power. We are told Israel is the only democratic government in West Asia. These are an integral part of that government. It is like taking Al-Qaeda and ISIS elements into the government in Iraq and pretending it is a democratic government. The third thing you note, that Israel is totally dependent on the United States. And this is not shocking. Please recall, and I will give you a historical background, the states that emerged after the Second World War under colonial tutelage were never intended to be capable of looking after their own security. It was always intended that they would be dependent on the West. Whether it is Pakistan, or it is Israel, or it is the Gulf Sheikdoms that emerged in the 1970s. All of them given the kind of sovereign status, but totally dependent on the West and serving the purposes of the West. Except in the case of Israel, you have a unique scenario where the West serves its purpose. But the fact is, it is not able to look after its own interests and has never been done. I have said here, US-Israel ties have been tested. That is true. But there is no capacity in the United States to say or do anything in public that would seriously put pressure on the Israelis. Netanyahu understands his American interlocutors far better than any one of them. And he is not restrained about embarrassing the American president or even humiliating him. He did this with regard to Obama when he spoke at the Congress and at the joint sitting and abused the nuclear agreement with Iran. And he did that again. With Biden sitting in the White House, he went and addressed the Congress. So this is where we are. I do not believe there is any likelihood that any American public figure will ever build up the courage to come out publicly and say, enough. That capacity does not exist. But there is a question to ask, possibly beyond the short term. Israel has enjoyed impunity on the world stage and particularly in the West because it was a victim of the Holocaust. The West is ridden with guilt. All of us who are students of that run up to 1939 know large sections of the Western communities supported Nazi Germany. During the war, large sections of the Western community were allied with the Nazi armed forces. Large sections of the American establishment supported Nazism. And today they tell us, we did not know in the war all of this happened, that the Holocaust occurred. And today they are guilt-ridden. Their heart bleeds for Jews because of the harm they did to them. But not one of them has paid the price for what was done to the Jewish communities in Europe. For 2000 years they were mistreated in Europe. It is ironical that they found sanctuary in the Muslim kingdoms. In Spain, and then when they were jointly Muslims and Jews were evicted from Spain, all across North Africa and in every other part of the Arab world, that is the place where Jewish culture, Jewish religion and their great scholarship flourished. You see, that is the way where you have Maimonides and his writings. They used to very often, they were preserved. They were cared for. If there is today a surviving faith, it was not in Europe. In Europe, they had pogroms. In these places, in the Muslim empires, they were protected and looked after. Today, ironically, the very guardians of the community are paying the price for what was done to the Jews in Europe, where murder of Jews was a pastime. It is never a part of the Islamic heritage, never a part of Islamic history. And this is where we are today, the Holocaust. Can Israel continue with this kind of impunity that it has today, of mass murder on the world stage in front of the eyes of everybody? Can it get away only because the Americans are too weak to do anything? I would leave this thought because I don't have the answer. Articles are written. Pankaj Mishra has written a substantial piece in the London Review of Books where he has raised this question. And this is a question that we can ask ourselves. I won't talk about this, it's a waste of time. Where do we go from here? All the points about the short term are with question marks because we do not even have a ceasefire just yet. What will be the nature of the ceasefire? Will there be a military occupation of Gaza? Will the Israeli forces withdraw and place an Arab force over there? What will happen in the West Bank? In the West Bank, my own sense is there will be a massive expansion of settlements that will continue. Possibly within a few years, 700,000 may become 1 million. What will be the state of politics within Israel itself? On the one hand, if there is some kind of an arrangement, a ceasefire that the right wing is not happy with, will they bring down the government? But the right wing, for the first time, extreme right wing, have experienced power. I'm not sure they are stupid enough to want to go back into the barracks far away from power. Maybe they will somehow tolerate some of the accommodations that Netanyahu comes up with. We don't know. We do not know what is the nature of the government. Will this government fall because there is a break within the administration? Possibly, possibly not. If there is an election, will you find that he has sacked the defense minister who was an ally of Benny Gantz? So will the two of them launch a formidable challenge, electoral challenge? Do recall here, none of these people who have deep differences with each other has any sense of accommodation as far as the Palestine cause is concerned. Be very clear about that. Those who protested in their hundreds of thousands against judicial reforms, that Netanyahu are not soft on the Palestine issue. Except for a few individuals who have emerged courageously and have spoken out on the media, overwhelmingly, it is said more than 70% of the Israeli people oppose a two-state solution. Possibly they don't know. It is not for us to imagine that they are fully informed. They are many times, they have been fed on a certain line over several decades, and they are terrified that if you have these, they see the Arab as a monster, as an ogre who will murder them in their sleep. So I don't think they know too much. And then what happens with Palestine? What happens with, will there be any movement? What kind of, what will be the state of play with regard to, what will be the Palestine Authority? The Israeli view today, they don't want to see the Palestine Authority again. What will be the future of Hamas? Will they lie low for a while and then emerge at some later stage? Because it is a movement. It's a movement based on idea. They have a certain popular support. The day the popular support withers away, they will cease to exist and certainly cease to matter. But there is this language that we have. And that is the language of depopulation, displacement and depopulation. It is catching up. It is not something far away. Official documents have also emerged in the public space, which talk about cleansing Gaza, sending away these 2 million people into the Sinai, initially into a tent city, and later on creating urban spaces where these people can finally flourish. And that space that is cleansed, that is displaced, that is cleansed, you will find, and that is what the right-wing Schmorish and Ben Guer are talking about, resettlement of the Jews in Gaza. Is that what we are finally looking at? As of now, the Egyptian leader, Sisi, has opposed it. Every Arab publicly has said they are not in favor of depopulation. They are not in favor of accommodation. The Israeli reports are very detailed, several pages, who say we can. One of them has even identified the number of vacant buildings in Egypt and said it's just cost $5 or $6 million for us to buy those properties, and we can relocate all these people in those ready-made houses. We don't even need a tent city. And then what happens? Not just now, not in the short term, but possibly over the medium term, what happens to the West Bank? One of the most discomfited individual today in West Asia is the King of Jordan. The King of Jordan, who has survived over so many decades because he has tied up with the Americans to protect him and to ensure that the final settlement of the West Bank does not find 3 million people relocated to Jordan, and you declare not the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, but the Republic of Jordan with an alternative Palestine that is created under Israeli auspices. We do not know. All the things that I have put down so carefully for you, none of them we do not know. We do not know the answer. I have raised the questions and all of them are with question marks. But let me now share with you some view of the longer term. Iran had put together the axis of resistance. The axis of resistance has received hammer blows. A superior conventional military force will invariably triumph against militia. Recall here what the Americans did. Attacked Afghanistan, destroyed the Emirate of Afghanistan, and remained in Afghanistan for another 2 decades. And you saw the circumstances in which they fled from Afghanistan, packed there by reminiscent of Vietnam. Look at what happened in the case of Iraq. They smashed Iraq within a few days. They destroyed the armed forces. They effected regime change. They ensured that Saddam Hussein was hanged publicly in abuse. And they remained for nearly 2 decades after that and ran from Iraq with the same ignominy. The militia makes itself felt over the longer term. This is a pattern in history, that a conventional military force hammers militant uprisings and destroys most of their leaders. And you can call them commander, commander-in-chief, area commander, local commander, all of that. That is rubbish. They are not a conventional force. You cannot annihilate them with firepower. As Biden said, one of the memorable things that pathetic individual said, that they are an idea. Look, Bibi, they are an idea. And you don't have a strategy. So this is where we do not know what will be the state with regard to Iran. Will there be a massive assault upon them? My personal view as of today is I doubt it. Because none of us has ever understood Donald Trump. Populist leaders tend to retain a certain enigma, a certain mystique about them. You know everything about Dr. Manmohan Singh and about Mr. Biden and about Mr. Obama. but you know very little about populist leaders because they don't come out in the public domain. You do not know much about Donald Trump. We do not know much about Mr. Modi. We do not know much about Jair Bolsonaro or of Boris Johnson. They retain a certain mystery about them. And that is why we do not know what Donald Trump will do. It will be a different regime perhaps to some extent from what was there. But I can't see him just yet, and I think I could be proven wrong sooner rather than later. I can't see him encouraging a region-wide conflict, the destruction of Iran. I don't believe that. Even at his worst period when he withdrew from the nuclear agreement and imposed onerous sanctions, he was still talking about a deal. He never once mentioned war. And if you remember, despite the provocations and the expectation in the Gulf that there would be war after the attack on the Saudi oil facilities, he never went to war. And then I again remind myself that it is not just Netanyahu that he is close to. He is close to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the President of the UAE. And I can't see these two leaders advising the Americans to go to war. Therefore, my sense is that there is unlikely to be a massive assault upon Iran in the near future. Of course, the Americans have a very weird political system in terms of which after winning the election, you actually enter the White House after 2 months. And that is, we don't know what will happen in these 2 months and what is Netanyahu's calculation in this period. Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of pressure on the kingdom to recognize, to normalize relations with Israel. I can't see that happening. There is a chorus of support as far as the American media is concerned. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which way the Gulfs are likely to go. I agree that they are self-absorbed and self-centered. I believe that regime survival is their priority. But I can't see even these leaders giving up on the Palestinians so easily and so quickly. If you see in Bob Woodward's book, MBS Mohammed bin Salman speaks to Blinken and said, look, I'm not bothered about the Palestinians, but my people are fixated on them. And therefore, in order to normalize, I seek 2 points from Israel. Number one, that I want to be quiet in Gaza. And he explained what quiet means. I don't want any Israeli soldier in Gaza. And number two, that he wants a genuine forward movement on the two-state solution. It doesn't mean that old days of making a loose remark are gone. It's genuine. And Blinken carried this message to Netanyahu, and Netanyahu more or less told him that if you want a token message, I can continue, but neither of these 2 points is going to happen anytime in the near future. I have got some uncertainties again. Saudi-Iran relations, I personally feel they will continue to be normal. It of course depends on what kind of outcome we have with regard to the military assault or not on Iran. But I believe that Saudi-Iran relations, absent that, will continue to be intact. They will see a certain growth. It's very difficult. You see, I'm finding it very awkward to talk about the region as if it is a normal scenario. It is actually not a normal scenario. And it has so many uncertainties. It is beset with so many uncertainties. And there is so little for us to say with regard to the future. We do not know. I have just thrown these ideas about what is going to be the role of Turkey. Very difficult to explain because the Turkish leader changes his colors from time to time depending on what he is. He was talking about Ottoman glory a short while ago, and much of that has withered away, and he is now deeply engaged with Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Egypt. Can Egypt emerge or re-emerge as a player in the region? I think it will be a player, but much less active in West Asia, possibly more active in the Horn of Africa. Its principal concerns today are the Red Sea, the East Mediterranean, and its ties with Ethiopia. Therefore, I think, yes, it will recover. It has a long way to go. Its economy is still a shambles, and its political order leaves much to be desired. But we will see.
Which way will Israel go? I have argued this for decades. There is no animosity for the Jewish people. There is overwhelming acceptance of the state of Israel. But it is all conditional on accommodating the aspirations of the Palestinian people. West Asia cannot be at peace until the Palestine issue is addressed and resolved on terms that are based on the two-state solution. Or any other solution, I leave it to the people themselves. I am not party to that. But unless you have addressed this, today the non-Jewish population in Israel and the occupied territories is possibly even more than the Jewish population. This is a very unsatisfactory and untidy state of affairs, and it needs to be addressed. You cannot address it through security. At least now the time has come for the Israelis to say that, look, we need to sit down and think things through in ways that we haven't done before. And it is on that basis that we have to look at Palestinian history. I started my remarks to you by saying that the history of this region is based on the engagements, the interplay of four communities: the Arab, the Persian, the Jewish, and the Turk. Turk over the 1,000 years. And of course, it has been overwhelmingly influenced by interactions from the West. Only on one occasion were there Eastern forces that had made themselves felt in West Asia, and that was the Mongol horde of Halaku Khan, who destroyed the Abbasid Caliphate and later on got integrated with the community and are part of the community now. That is the one occasion. But from that side, all the way, of course, when the Persian empires were robust, you had the Persians going across and then coming back. People say that the Greek and Trojan War is a war which goes as the original war between the people of West Asia and the people of Europe. Alexander's incursion was another robust. But the most important thing has been the last 200 years. And the last 200 years, you've had a very strong presence of the West, a seriously damaging presence on the West, and much of what has gone wrong in the region is due to their intervention, political and military. In this context, at some stage, we have to see Israel recognizing the fact that it is not the bastion of Western civilization in the East. It is not the last wall against Asian barbarism, as Herzl had said. It is an integral part of West Asia. Its people belong in West Asia. They went into the diaspora as a result of Roman war. They have come back home, I recognize that. But they have to now accept they are not a European people. Europe treated them very badly, culminating in the Holocaust of 2,000 years of mistreatment. Let them accept, number one, that we are an integral part of West Asia, that this is where we belong. Number two, that our security is based on very substantial engagements with our neighbors, based on the settlement of the Palestinian issue. And that is the basis on which you will have normalization. I want to also make one last remark, and with that I will close, and that is the saddest and the most, it's full of anguish. We are in the Islamic center, and we celebrate Islamic culture. I say to you today with the deepest anguish that you are looking at the lowest point of Islamic politics and culture today. The Arabs have been a defeated people for more than a millennium after the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate. The Turks have been defeated for 200 years. The Persians for 200 years. It is the Jews that are today triumphant. It's a cycle of history. But should we not, every major Muslim entity, I have given you a map here of the 17th century where Muslim power was at its peak. The Mughal Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Between them, They were the greatest powers in their time. This was Muslim culture at its climax, at its zenith. It offered so much to the world at that time. Today you see a malaise. You see a deep-seated malaise. A people repeatedly betrayed by their own leaders. And I ask myself this, is this acceptable? Is this sustainable? Can we remain with this sense of defeat, degradation, humiliation? 42,000 Palestinians killed in front of our eyes, and not a single person has the courage to stand up and say, enough. You can only have peace on the basis of strength. You must have self-confidence. You must have strength. Nazi Ayubi wrote the book Overstating the Arab State, where he called the Arab state is a hard state. It is not a strong state. It uses its powers to oppress its people. So that the most powerful element in the state is the security forces that terrorize the people themselves. It has no army that can protect its interests from external neighbors. All the security and armed forces are utilized to oppress the people at home. That is not acceptable, and that is not sustainable. Thank you. Thank you.
Please, huh?
I would like this to be organized.
Okay. So, thank you, Talmiz Ahmad Sahab, for this lovely lecture. I was watching my mobile phone for time, but when Dr. Talmiz says you don't have to see the phone all the time. So before I formally open for question answer session, may I request Mani to say a few words, then I will be opening the floor. Mike, could you please come here, sir? अच्छा अभी बैठ के बोले जैसा बोले ओके
as an Indian, I come to this meeting in sackcloth and ashes, for I am very ashamed of the stand that India has taken with regard to the issues that were so convincingly placed before us by my friend Talmiz Ahmad. It is awful that we express, that the Prime Minister of India expresses total solidarity with the Israel whose profile has been so brilliantly placed before us. Total solidarity with him. Where an attempt is made to subterraneanly draw a parallel between Hamas and the Lashkar-e-Toiba in order to involve us emotionally on the Israeli side. I also feel that it is disgraceful for us to constantly abstain in the United Nations on various resolutions relating to this issue. For non-alignment, as conceived by Jawaharlal Nehru, was never about neutrality. We always said we would be involved with every international issue, but on merits as we saw it. So if you abstain for fear that Netanyahu might get annoyed, if you abstain for fear that somebody in the Muslim world may get annoyed, then you're being a coward. You're not being non-aligned. And you're not even being multi-aligned. You're just being a coward. And India, in the last few years, has demonstrated that it is instinctively, I'm talking of Modi's India, is instinctively with Netanyahu. Why? What has Netanyahu to do with our country? Only one thing. The manner in which he has utilized the threat of terrorism as a way of provoking attacks on an innocent people. He has cast himself, and our Prime Minister has accepted that, as a model for India to follow. And it's disgraceful that a leader who has been accused by the International Court of Justice of being involved in genocide should be the role model that we have. Israel and the civilization that it represents, whatever those achievements, is exclusivist. India can survive only if we are inclusive. There is too much diversity in India for us to follow the Pakistani example of trying to impose unity by invoking Islam. What has happened there? First, a majority of their population broke away, in the sense of East Pakistan having left them. And second, as I saw during my posting in Pakistan, and the many visits I made to Pakistan in the 40 years that I've been away, I've been to Pakistan more than 40 times, and I'm very, very proud of that. I find that Pathans are Pathans, Punjabis are Punjabis, Sindhis are Sindhis, the Baloch are Baloch. Who is a Pakistani? Now that's not the... And why has that happened? It's because Pakistan has taken the Arab world as the model for them to follow. Now in the Arab world, they all have a common religion. They all have a common sense of identity, in the sense that they describe themselves as Arabs. They all speak in various dialects of Arabic, but they tend to understand each other as easily as Indians and Pakistanis understand each other, even if they say they're talking Urdu and we say we're talking Hindi, but actually we're talking Hindustani. So if you try and impose unity through uniformity, it is feasible to think in those terms in West Asia and North Africa, which is why Gamal Abdel Nasser was the hero that he turned out to be. But despite being that, despite being an unchallenged leader of the Arab world and an icon, he never could continue with the establishment of the United Arab Republic. It collapsed even as it was being set up. So Pakistan can survive, by which I don't mean survive physically, but survive and flourish only if it accepts that it's a South Asian country. And if India ceases to be a South Asian country and tries to become like Israel, then as a Tamilian, I warn you, Tamil Nadu might prove to be our East Pakistan. There is a very, very strong sense, which is growing at the moment in many southern states, as to why are we being punished for our virtues. We're growing faster than the rest of the country. Our population has been controlled more effectively than the rest of the country. And what are we getting in return? Much less money per capita than the northern states are. And now the danger and the threat that delimitation might result in the southern states losing 100 seats. And these 100 seats being transferred to a part of the country that has been growing slower than the south in all dimensions except population. And it's so ironic that in this northern part of India, the Muslims are being targeted for having a higher population growth rate. But as S.Y. Qureshi has pointed out, this has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with economic status and educational status. And whatever might have been the trends in the 1950s, between the 1951 census and the 1961 census, and even between the 1961 census and the 1971 census, now birth rates in the Hindu community and the non-Hindu communities are approximating to the same point. But the fact remains that Hindu or Muslim, compared to the north, the south has more effectively handled both questions of economic development as well as of population control. And now we have Mr. Stalin saying that the only answer to what is being done to us is to increase the number of children. Having so successfully run a population control program, to be driven to the point where the only way of retaining our political clout in all of India is to have more children, is to place a part of India's population in front of a terrible dilemma. So we cannot be like Israel. And that being so, I'll just finish in a minute. And that being so, we have to remember what Jawaharlal Nehru had to say in 1947. India was a member of both the committees that the UN set up to decide on the question of the partition of Palestine. And it so happened that we were going through the trauma of the partition of India while the West was thinking in terms of finding a solution by partitioning Palestine. And we warned against it. We became, in 1947, the only non-Muslim, non-Arab country in Asia to vote against the partition of Palestine. And what Jawaharlal Nehru said then is, I think, ultimately going to be the only solution. For while all of us would welcome a two-state solution, many of our West Asia experts, including Hamid Ansari, in the Foreign Service, see that as a pipe dream. But what could happen is the Nehruvian solution of having one state, but a federated state, in which there is a portion that has a Jewish majority and another portion that has an Arab majority, but they run the government together. And so the Jews do not have to be driven into the sea, which was an unfortunate expression once used by Nasser, but can remain where they are, but on terms other than the ones which brought them to Israel, which has been brilliantly exposed by Talmiz in the earlier part of his lecture. So there is a solution that we can offer. We can play a creative role, but not if we become the blind followers of Benjamin Netanyahu. I hope the message that will go from this meeting to those in power will indicate that India has to emerge once again as a leading power in Middle Eastern politics. Who did the Arabs turn to? They turned to India. Whom did Gamal Abdel Nasser turn to? He turned to India. We used to have massive rallies in Ramlila grounds in support of the Palestinian cause. Now the Palestinian cause has been converted into the Islamic Center's cause. It's a great pity. We did not have a religious divide on this issue. But increasingly now, I have to go to the Jamia Millia, not to the JNU, to discuss these issues, or come to the Islamic Center. So therefore, we need to recover our own identity as part and parcel of the crusade for peace that we hope will take place in West Asia and that will solve the terrible humanitarian crisis that has overtaken that part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mani. And just one information that I don't know whether you are knowing or not. In Dharamshala, there is International Film Festival is going on from 7th of this month up to 10th, means till tomorrow. There were 2 Palestinian films, No Other Land and From Ground Zero. They were supposed to be shown there, but just now I got this information. They were pulled at the last moment, and according to the organizers, they could not get quote-unquote official permission. So now I open the floor for any question. Yeah, please. हाँ. माइक उनको आप दे सकते हैं.
Under the background of this conflict or war, whatever you may call it, what may be the role and impact of this conflict on the international bodies, including United Nations? Do they have any future, or they will be dismantled? Number 2, I want to understand, why can't we call this conflict as a proxy third world war in this region? Thank you.
Any other question? Yeah, please. Give the mic to the lady.
Hello, sir. I have 2 questions. First, when
Could you please
said...
introduce yourself?
I'm Ifra. I'm a master's student from Jamia Millia Islamia, and my course is Peace and Conflict, and which is why I'm here. So my first question is, when you mentioned that Mohammed bin Salman mentioned about 2-state solution, or that US mentioned about 2-state solution, in a previous conference, a scholar came and he said that he does not agree on a 2-state solution. And here I want to know your opinion. What do you, and your experience, and given that I have read a little of your book, what do you think about a 2-state solution? And my second question with this is that whenever we talk about all these things, right, that it's a conflict, it's a war, and there is a humanitarian intervention, there is this and that, and do you think that whatever is happening right now from past 50 years or something, this conflict resolution is a Eurocentric concept to most of wherever the conflict happens? Eurocentric concept. Do you think that it is, with the definition of West Asia and what...
Is the conflict Eurocentric? strategic.
Is it a Eurocentric concept of US, intervening everywhere and everything? So yeah, thank you.
I think first we will request Talmiz to answer, then we will take the third one. Yeah.
You see, the international bodies reflect the reality of world politics. They don't have an identity or capacity of their own. Hence, it's in the case of the Security Council, the veto of the United States has ensured that the Security Council is non-functional. The UN General Assembly has passed the resolutions. If the Security Council represents the power of the world order, the General Assembly represents the conscience of the world. I think the conscience of the world has been made very clear. Most of their resolutions have passed by between 110 and 125 countries voting together, and many others have abstained. The numbers opposing have been very, very small, usually United States and some of its Western allies. So, but we need these institutions. Israel is viscerally hostile to all of them because it sees the international opinion as being hostile to itself. So it speaks with contempt of them. But what is worrying is that the institutions of the United Nations that work well and that have indeed been successful, these are the humanitarian organizations connected with health, with food, with humanitarian assistance. The Israelis have deliberately targeted those institutions as well, so that they don't have any functioning over there in the name of looking after Hamas's interests, etc. So as of now, you don't see effective presence of the international community as represented by these global institutions, international institutions. I don't see them functioning. And now when you have Mr. Trump has a long record of being very hostile to such institutions, and I don't think the situation is likely to improve in any period of time. Should we call this a proxy war? See, proxy war, in the case of Ukraine, there is no doubt. You have to see the Ukraine conflict as the attempt by the United States to retain its hegemonic stature globally and ensure that the Western alliance is retained as part of that. Ask yourself, after the Cold War, why was NATO retained? NATO was retained because it is the platform on the basis of which the United States asserts its hegemony. Otherwise, the United States would have become Fortress America and gone back beyond the Atlantic. It had to retain. Not only did they retain NATO, they gradually expanded NATO toward Russia. That means as if the Cold War was not over, that the Cold War dynamics had now shifted in favor of the Western alliance, and they were able to shift. The literature relating to the run-up to the Ukraine war is very, very rich, but it'll take me a long time to talk about it. My own sense is, looking back, that the United States effort, there is a churn in world order, no doubt about it. The other countries have become more influential and are emerging as players. One small point to be noted with regard to the run-up to the events after the Cold War is that European countries at that time actually thought they would become strategic role players of their own. And part of retaining NATO was to ensure that did not happen. So you have today this conflict. The American weaponry is there, already 70 billion. Much more is coming. The idea was to debilitate the Russian war capacity. Therefore, push the war as much as possible. Keep it going. I have written a review of Woodward's book, where I pointed out he doesn't refer to any of the peace processes that happened and which the Americans deliberately had ensured were non-functional. We could have a sort of ceasefire now. I don't think they will be going back to the situation that prevailed earlier. But it is a proxy war. It's a proxy war, it's an open war. The Western alliance against Russia. Russia is being supported by a set of countries, and their writing in Foreign Affairs already speaks of this authoritarian cabal of Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, and how the United States-Western alliance has to gear itself for this. The Americans were talking, as usual, completely misguided, of a conflict between authoritarianism and democracy, given that the best of the friends that they have, friends in inverted commas, have not seen any whiff, have not had any whiff of democracy. It's a bit rich to be talking of such a coalition. And to invite one country and not to invite another for that completely bogus conference that they have from time to time, democracy conference, I think it will very rightly wither away. With regard to the Gaza war and the war that is in West Asia today, I personally see it as a proxy war as well, except that it is not a war because on the other side, there is no partner. China and Russia are not robust role players in the military sense. Their heart may belong, as of now, the war is only between Israel and Iran. We may argue that Iran is a part of that mystical alternative order, the one that will finally confront the Western alliance. It is not so as of now. Having said this, the fact that Israel was constructed as a Western bastion, that Israel has survived all these decades as partner of the West, and indeed from the last at least 3 or 4 decades has influenced American policy in its favor, so that it is Israel's interests that are supreme in Washington, and very often the two are articulated as if they are congruent, but they are not. The Americans have no capacity for independent foreign policy initiatives in West Asia. They are totally supportive of Israel and totally hostile to Iran. So what is the US objective? The US objective, while I still agree that it is part of the larger competition in terms of shaping the global order, it is to ensure that West Asia does not assert strategic autonomy. That the conflict scenario is kept, it keeps the tempo in such a way that the Arab countries which have been flirting with strategic autonomy over the last 2 years, are sufficiently seen to be insecure to come back to their alliance with the Americans. So they are actually encouraged this confrontation with Iran to discredit Iran and to debilitate Iran as a fighting force, so that these countries are able to recognize that their future lies with the Americans. This is what is that. But it is a more complicated scenario. It's not the same straightforward situation that you have with Ukraine. It is difficult to see which way it will go. You see, in this time, China has not been an active player. I have argued and I believe that over the longer period, as the United States stands discredited, or it discredits itself or shows less interest in the region, it is likely to be China that will be a major player. And just as much as the United States uses military force to subserve its interests, China has been a much more attractive a partner because it talks the language of economic cooperation, of investments, of joint ventures, of logistical connectivity, all of which are very alluring. In imitation, the Americans have come up with this IMEC, which is the joke of this century, because IMEC requires we already are using the Suez Canal. Of course, now the Houthis have created problem. Otherwise, you have a very easy connectivity between Asia and Europe. The American brilliant idea to integrate Israel with West Asia is to get all these Asian countries to bring their goods to Gulf ports, unload them, load them onto a railway system, and the railway system chugs along to Haifa, where it is loaded again onto ships. The railway system doesn't exist. So what are we talking about? This is absolutely nonsensical. The most idiotic proposal that I have seen. So I would say that we are looking at a very major churn in world affairs. Things happen at the global level, at the regional level, and at the domestic level. So we are watching all those. There are several things happening at the same time. Sometimes we don't always have full information about each of them. We don't know the full implications. Like I don't have the full knowledge as of now. Like all of us, I don't know what is likely to happen day after tomorrow. Therefore, but I can sense that what the language that Netanyahu has used, that reordering West Asia. Reordering means hitting hard at Iran so that there is today no one left. If you remember, if you go back a bit, the threat, quote unquote, that Israel had sensed was Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Iraq and Syria are destroyed in various ways and in various shapes. Iran was the only one that was left that was crippled by sanctions. But today it has been even further threatened. And the Israelis have said that we have taken out all their defense systems. Much of this is misinformation also. We actually don't know what happened, and neither side is sharing too much information. And we don't know what is the capacity. But I would straight away accept that Iran does not have the capacity for a significant conventional confrontation. This is not their business. They had set up these they had set up this axis of resistance to shift the frontier of conflict far away from their own border. That has since been breached. So you find nowadays that there is this kind of confrontation. Where it will leaves us confused. We don't know. Can you really rebalance the region? The region has already been, I mean, I was going to use the word pathetic, but I've already used it so often with Mr. Biden, but a parlous situation where the Arab world is at the lowest level with the deepest possible malaise, with a leadership that is terrified, is insecure, and lives from day to day on the basis of its security forces and co-opting them with its oil riches. You have Turkey, which is a maverick state. It's impossible to take Turkey seriously because it doesn't have a stability. Sometimes we think that they are going in one direction, sometimes they go in the other direction. They are still a member of NATO and the second largest military force in NATO. They have substantial ties with Israel. And now so you have this and you have Iran. Iran has been crippled systematically over 40 years with the sanctions. So it is very difficult to see which way the scenario in West Asia will evolve. If I may say so, if the Semitic fates emerge from this region, the reason why we needed so many prophets so frequently is because of the state of the people. They still need a prophet who will come with a magic wand or with a new message and completely refresh the region and make it resurgent. Today it is at a very low ebb. All of them, the four people who have interplayed with each other, all four of them are at a very low ebb and are not inspirational at all. Two-state solution, you see, two-state solution is now a buzzword. I don't think it has any validity at all. It's just a mantra. The only reason you gave it had a certain resonance is because Biden also used it in a moment of clarity, which disappeared. He never did anything about it. A two-state solution is totally opposed to the basis on which Israel was created, which I showed. Unless we see that, the messianic vision that animates Israel, in that vision, how does a two-state solution fit in? Extermination, exile, enslavement. Where is the two-state solution? You just say it and then we go home. The Saudis were supposed to have said, let him just say that he agrees to it. He has done it once, by the way. He doesn't remember it. He has done it once. He never meant it. So I'm not sure there is going to be that kind. I said, I became teary-eyed and visionary. And I blurted at some forum that I have a dream. I have a dream. I'm very embarrassed to quote Martin Luther King. I do believe it will happen. Way into the future, you will have a new generation of Israelis and Palestinians who will recognize that, look, we are children of the same father. That Prophet Abraham fathered us. We are the children of Abraham. And, he fathered us from two of his spouses. And what have we done with each other for so long? We lived together for all this period. It's the Romans that hit the Jews because the Jews were opposed to the Roman faith. In the meantime, we got Islam in large quantities and, of course, large numbers, and you have Christian communities, very complex Christian communities. We don't know everything about all of them. And the Westerners are the ones who have intervened so frequently and carried messages that have divided people. There are alternatives which were possible. The partition of India, you have seen the poison that is still with us 75 years later. It doesn't go away. The Westerners poison the well and leave, but the well doesn't ever become clean. And you have seen the example of India. You can see the example of Israel and the neighborhood, and you have seen the melees of the Gulf states. All of them structured by a retreating imperial power. So we don't have any solution. There will be only one solution, and that solution will be divinely provided, and that is the one state. There will be a one state solution where we can all live together in peace and harmony and love each other. Is this a geostrategic conflict? I think I have answered this question as elaborately as I could, that every conflict is geostrategic. The language used is religion, economy, or competitions on this or that. It is basically the assessment of one country in terms of its strategic interests, which is a complex concept. The basis for Saudi-Iran confrontation was not because one was Shia and other was Sunni. That was not ever the case. It was articulated in sectarian terms, but it was a strategic. Saudis felt a sense of strategic vulnerability with the fall of Saddam Hussein. But they created a balance of power in the region by developing ties with Hosni Mubarak. So you had the Egypt-Riyadh coalition gave you the balance vis-a-vis Iran. The fall of Hosni Mubarak broke that balance again. It is in that context that the Saudis decided to confront Iran in Syria. And that is the basis for everything that has happened. But not Shia and Sunni, though it is very easy to use the language. And some American president who last read a history book in school says, they've had wars for the last 1500 years. They hate each other for 1500 years. So this is the kind of loose remark that people... The other day I made a remark and made a presentation, and the person said, the Jews and the Muslims hate each other for 1500 years. As if he had not heard my remarks at all. And I wanted to stop him and say, look, please, I didn't say that. That's not my understanding at all. There's no element of faith. Yes, on the Jewish side, there is the Messianic, and they believe they are entitled. The lore is to be understood. God punished. The Old Testament God is a very harsh God. And he punished his people. He punished them in the diaspora. And he tested them furiously. He tested them worst of all, gave them the worst possible punishment through the Holocaust. The fact that they could come back to Israel and create the state of Israel is read as now we are forgiven. Now we are forgiven. Now God is once again with us. We are now his chosen people. And we have this mission, and that the rest you have seen. We are the chosen people. This is the sacred land, and we cannot share it with anybody. So it has been read, not in terms of accommodation and in terms of peace. It has been read opposite, that there is a divine retribution that is called for against those who are the other side, the alien.
I'm afraid... no, I will take only one question. Bas, just give the mic. Only one last one. I'm very sorry, we are already late. Could you please introduce yourself, sir?
Good evening. I am Basim Hillis, Consular of Palestinian Embassy. I want to ask Excellency Ambassador, is there any change about the new administration in USA electing Trump about Palestinian issue in new future? Is there any change about your expectation? Another thing I want to talk about the two-state solution and the peace process with Israel's side. You know, we signed agreement, Oslo Agreement, 1993. And that time, the majority of Israel's people support peace. And now, the majority of Israel's people against peace. And the Israeli side killed the both leader, killed Ishaq Rabin and our leader Yasser Arafat, because they signed the agreement to solution two-state peace. Now the situation in Palestine changed, and all the Israeli people against peace, and most of them fundamentalism and not support peace. Just
Thank you. Thank you. I'm afraid that is the last question. Yeah.
Even God does not know what Mr. Trump will be doing tomorrow. I dare not even speculate. He exemplifies chaos and anarchy. And I don't think that has changed. What may change is what may be part of his psyche could be a sense of vengefulness and entitlement, because he truly believes and his supporters believe that he was robbed in 2020 of the election. He has therefore now redeemed himself, and his supporters have redeemed himself. My sense is as follows. I'm still going to be courageous with the full knowledge that I'll be proven wrong day after tomorrow, if not tomorrow. My understanding is as follows. As I said, he does not want conflict. He does not like conflict. He wants America to be strong, and he wants the military to be strong. He also loves to sell arms, not to use arms. And if Israel, you don't need a war to sell arms, so long as you have the Gulf states. Why do you need a Ukraine war and kill 1 million people in Ukraine? If you look at the map, there is no hope in hell that Zelensky was going to win, or that he is going to get back all the territories he has lost. But you gave $70 billion worth of weaponry there and $20 billion of weaponry to Israel. You don't need this. What is $90 billion for my Arab brothers? For the next 20, 25, 30 years, they are going to sell oil. The green transition, at least Donald Trump will set the green transition back. But even otherwise, we are going to be oil dependent. Asia is going to be oil dependent. India, China, Japan, I don't know about Japan. India and China, certainly, and many other countries, we are going to be oil dependent. $90 billion, you can sell weapons of $200 billion to the Arabs and there is no problem. No war, no Arab. You saw one war the Saudis initiated in Yemen. 10 years later, they are still fighting it. It's a futility of war. So I don't believe that. So Mr. Trump likes weaponry and likes this, but he doesn't like it to be used. He likes, his focus is business. In business, he likes trade. He likes the Americans to sell more than they buy. It's something fixed in his head. He hates any trade scenario where there is a balance of trade in somebody else's favor. So it is expected, and Chinese are talking about it, that there could be certain punitive customs duties on Chinese product, which he started, which Biden continued, and actually in the month of June expanded to include, added more customs duties on electric vehicles to get the vote in Michigan, because that is where they make the electric vehicle, American electric vehicle in Michigan, to get the Michigan vote, which he didn't get. Because the Arab Americans somehow, not due to the electric vehicles, but due to Gaza, voted for Trump. Large numbers of them voted for Trump. So you may support the electric vehicle industry. but you should also know what else is happening in the rest of the world. But there, let us leave it, otherwise I'll get even more intemperate. So I think he is going to focus on this. In politics, we are looking at what will be the shape of things. So if I may put the priorities down. Number one, Ukraine and Russia. Where will it go? Our Russians seem very pleased, very chuffed. And Putin is grinning from year to year. China. And the trade side, much less Taiwan. It's Biden who pushed this Taiwan business as a, as a kind of this other side of the coin, the confrontation, Ukraine and then Taiwan. So Taiwan was built up as a serious issue. I don't think there's going to be conflict on Taiwan. I don't think there's a very lucrative relationship already. I don't think China, I don't think so. So Taiwan would be this China. Third is the future of European Union. Each of the major countries is in crisis. And then he has contempt for them. And future of NATO. What will be there? He is going to demand more contributions in the defense field for NATO. And now comes West Asia. What is it likely to be his position? We don't know. We have been fed on the basis that he loves Netanyahu. And that is due to the Christian evangelist. But we don't know now what is his position likely to be. Everyone is watching that. Netanyahu is functioning as if he's on a second honeymoon. But we don't know which way things will go. There is also the domestic side of Israeli politics separate from what Trump might do. We need to, that's also an area of serious uncertainty. The conventional wisdom is that Trump hates Iran and would perhaps support an assault on Iran. I doubt that. You can hate Iran, but you can put sanctions. You remember the sanctions. Every other day, after the elections, Iran, Pompeo, they have got 4,000 sanctions on Iran. They finally put Iran sanctions on Khamenei and his family and things like that, as if they have bank accounts in Washington. Things like that. So it was a kind of madness that had seized Washington at that time. So sanctions, there is, Trump could become a maverick and say, let's talk a deal with Iran. I don't know. So, you could do that. I don't know. Let us leave it at that. I don't have any further. But he's a person which we'll be watching carefully. We don't know too much about it. He's not going to be president for another 2 months. So we are going to have a very excruciating time from now till then, because everyone is going to pontificate on this. And our television screens are full of people who believe, like I spoke in the last 10 minutes, but you asked me, that's why I spoke. But otherwise, nobody knows. It's an enigma. Populist leaders keep a very strong sense of mystique. They don't talk about too much, don't expose themselves too much. This because they may expose how little they know.
So now I would request Siraj Bhai for the concluding remarks.
So thank you very much. Actually, when we conceived the series, we were not very sure that we will be able to fill up the hall. So I would really like to thank everyone for coming and participating very actively. Actually, we had planned today's event for about 1 hour and 15 minutes, but we have taken about 2 hours and 15 minutes, which shows that Mr. Talmiz Ahmad has really been able to get your attention continuously for so long. Now, he wrote this book, which is available outside during the COVID-19 lockdown, and I would like all of you to read that book. In any case, you should at least read the chapter on Iran, because as he pointed out, it is Iran which is going to be in the news. And those of you who do not really want to read books and still want to know more about Iran, I would recommend that you listen to the Empire podcast of William Dalrymple and Anita Anand. There is a very fascinating conversation which you would have heard, so in any case, with Professor Ali Masood Ansari, who is a professor of modern history in St. Andrews University in Scotland. It's an extremely fascinating talk. He's an extremely knowledgeable person about Iran. In fact, he has set up an institute for Iranian studies in this university. So that will give you some idea about what we can expect in Iran. Now, one last thing is, as Mr. Manishankar Iyer pointed out, the discussion on Israel's war in the Middle East has not been a common feature in the think tanks of Delhi, and you would recall that IIT Bombay had to cancel a talk of Achin Vinayak, and even in IIC, when an event was organized, Achin Vinayak was only invited as a participant. In JNU recently a talk was scheduled, that was also cancelled. So I'm really happy that so many of you could come and listen to an expert in the field, and I'm also really grateful to Mr. Manishankar Iyer who came. Sir, if you permit me, I'll say something about the next talk. Actually, I did not have your number. So, and you are not on WhatsApp. So I talked to Yamini. I said, please give me his number because I want to invite him for the next talk. And you have come, so let me extend that invitation publicly. Sir, we would, in this series, we would like to hear you about India's neighborhood. Because for a variety of reasons, we have not had the best of relations with our neighbors in the recent past. So I will formally request you to give some date in December, and we would like to host you. And I hope that we will again be able to fill up the hall. So thank you very much for coming.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So may I request Dr. Shamama for a formal vote of thanks?
Just एक line. आप बैठ जाइए.
Vote of thanks is already done by Mr. Siraj. Ji, still. That was truly an excellent lecture, as we all know. It was both informative and very, very engaging. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Talmiz Ahmad for taking his time out for his busy schedule, and also to Mr. Manishankar. I extend my thanks to each one of you who has given time here. Thank you very much.